Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done, and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour to be a part of the program. It is a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. So, how many of you have been perusing through the internet, and after decades of practicing identifying the difference between a staircase and a bicycle, have been prompted with a reCAPTCHA that requires you to scan a QR code? So this is the latest thing that is coming down the pipe. It's not good. So essentially, any site using reCAPTCHA is eventually going to require Play services enabled on a phone or an iOS device to get through the CAPTCHA. I think we all understood, and we're all tolerant of this idea that you don't want robots, you don't want spam, you don't want this. And so put this little reCAPTCHA in front, solve a puzzle, and prove that you're human. The problem is, the robots have become as good as people are at solving puzzles. And so it's becoming increasingly difficult to separate people from robots. So the latest iteration is they're going to tie you to a smartphone. Now here's the really insidious part. Google has tied the next generation reCAPTCHA to Google Play services on Android, meaning that anyone running a de-Googled phone is automatically going to fail the verification when the system decides to challenge them. So the requirement essentially forces users to run Google's proprietary app framework, version 25.41.30 or higher, just to prove that they're human. That's the bad part. Here's the worst part. They're allowing iOS users to not be held to the same requirement, which tells you this is less about security. This is less about making sure human, not human, and more about platform control. But we are make no mistake about it. We are embarking upon a world in which you will go and buy the little piece of glass that they tell you to buy. You'll run the software that they tell you to run, and you will use that to interact with modern technology. This is I am not a, scream from the rooftops kind of guy, for the most part, but most other technologies or most technology pivots allow you to be the guy out. You still retain the opportunity to install your own operating system, do your own thing, right? And there was a time when people said, hey, the building your own PC market is going to come to an end because of commercially made PCs. And while that didn't exactly happen, you can still go to Newegg and build yourself out a box, and many people do. The reality is it became a lot less common. So you don't have computer stores in your town anymore, at least I don't. Computer stores where there's a dude building computers for you. And you go and pick one out or pick out the parts. That has changed. The problem here is this stuff is increasingly sitting in front of every website on the internet. So if nobody said anything when they gave you a device that you didn't have administrative access to. Nobody said anything when it was one of two companies that you had to purchase a device from, and those were your only two real options. And the consequence of not speaking up on those two things is now those of us who function in a de-Googlified way are about to hit a pretty major roadblock. I'll draw your attention to the iOS comparison, because Apple devices running iOS 16.4 or later will be able to complete the same verification, but they don't have to install any additional apps. So Google isn't demanding that iPhone users install any Google software. Only Android users who refuse Google Play services are getting locked out. So you watch, and I've already seen it's already started. It's just not strictly enforced yet. So you have the option of doing like the visual verification. But millions of websites are about to hit a point when the precedence is to establish a basic web content is going to require Google software and transmitting data to Google servers. It's interesting. There's a couple of pieces of software that have been drawing attention to stuff like this for a long time. The most notable is F-Droid. If you open F-Droid, at the very top there's a big red banner and it says F-Droid is under threat. Google is changing the way you install apps on your phone. We need your help. And then it links to keepandroidopen.org, where it, as the recording of this podcast, 98 days until lockdown. Starting September 2026, a silent update pushed non-consensually by Google will block every Android app whose developer hasn't registered with Google and signed their contract, paid up front, and handed over a government ID. And then it goes in to explain what this is doing, and then it goes on to explain what they call the escape hatch. Google says power users can still install verified apps, but here's what that actually looks like. You have to delve into the system settings. You have to tap on a build over 7 times to enable developer mode. You have to dismiss the scare screens about coercion. You have to enter in your PIN. You have to restart the device. You have to wait 24 hours. You have to come back and dismiss more scare screens. You have to pick allow temporarily for 7 days or allow indefinitely, and then you have to confirm again that you understand the risk. 9 steps and a mandatory 24-hour cooling off period before you can install a piece of software on your own device. Welcome to 2026, when we lost control of our smartphones. And if you're like me, I couldn't be more ready to get rid of it. Now, 2-bit in the Geek Lab, you can join hashtag geeklab:linuxdelta.com. 2-bit says where you can run Graphene OS. I have Graphene OS. Problem is I have Graphene OS that doesn't have Google Play services. So when this CAPTCHA thing comes a-knocking, and it is coming, and I go to scan the CAPTCHA, first of all, I wouldn't do that, but if I was going to, it's not going to allow me to complete the challenge because I don't have Google Play services. And OBT dubs, the absolute last thing I want to do when I'm sitting down in front of my computer and visiting a website is reach for my phone to scan a QR code so I can continue. Mildly ridiculous. So we'll have the link for you in the show notes, podcast.asknoahshow.com. But I submit to you, we are on a very bad track. We are on a very bad track and we are getting worse. And the problem is, I don't not understand why companies are doing what they're doing. Google is, all these companies, they have a huge problem. And the huge problem is that the robots have taken over the world. And so it's difficult to discern you, the human being, from a robot. The problem is, if you're like me, you want to remain anonymous. And the problem with you and I being anonymous is it makes us indistinguishable in most cases from a robot. And that's a problem. So I don't know, again, keepandroidopen.org, worth going to, worth signing worth signing the document that they have, worth speaking up. If you know anybody at Google, worth tapping them on the shoulder and saying, yo, what are you doing? But in the end, I think this problem gets worse before it gets better. Jef Spaleta. He is one of Fedora's original early contributors and now the Fedora project lead at Red Hat. The guest this hour on the Ask Noah Show. Jef, welcome into the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for making the time to be here. So you described Fedora's governance model as a weird research university. For somebody who just uses Fedora as a rolling release desktop and never contributes, what does that model mean for them practically in terms of stability and frequency and change and the kind of software decisions that you made, those sorts of things?
Oh, well, I've always thought of Fedora's core mission was to be like an innovation engine. Like even back in the day when Red Hat decided to take that initial journey with the community, right? And for me, because I have a career partly as an academic, right? Like the model for governance fits for me because I look at the contributors, I look at the people making the technical decisions. That flat hierarchy is like a faculty, right? It's like the faculty's FESCO, it's like a faculty senate. The users are sort of like the students, right? We're learning. In fact, I actually think about it as you get involved because you're learning a new skill or you're digging in, you're understanding the technology, right? So I think about it that way, right? And it's a public service, right? Just like a university. And then I look at the government structure, and this helps me figure out the relationship where I am now as part of governance, right? I think of myself as the president of a weird university, right? And and council is sort of the regents. And I'm talking to a U.S. experience. The Europeans, they might use different terms, right? So they may think chancellor. The roles change based on where you're at geopolitically. But in the U.S. at least, I look at it as I'm the president, and the council is the regents, and then the funders in this case is Red Hat. Like it's like the state ledge, right? Where they provide the funding for the primary funding resources, and then the regents have to do the hard work of aligning what the faculty want, right? That flat hierarchy, and then what the structured hierarchy is, that is the funding agency, right? Yeah. And so council does the hard work of figuring out strategic direction, where things are pointing, and then the faculty do the work, right? And so what is it in terms of frequency and stability? I mean, I think of it as a long journey. Like this is an institution, right? And it just helps me figure out those relationships. So I'm in the right mindset, and council in the right mindset. So we're doing strategic work. So that model doesn't really impact users so much as it's just how I frame the relationships so that we can do the work. So we're thinking 10 years out, and we're making plans, and so that we're supporting the right outputs that make sense like a decade from now.
So I guess you mentioned that you've thought of Fedora as kind of like an incubator or similar type thing, right? Like where it is that's where the cutting edge work happens.
Well, not necessarily cutting edge. I think the cutting edge is actually in the upstreams. What Fedora is really doing is a conversation between about how to integrate all that interesting work, right? The upstreams are where the work, like let's, we're in the sandwich, right? We're in the middle. We integrate work, and we have to do some of the innovation there. But it's the conversation about how we fully integrate all of that into things that people can use. Because individual upstreams are great, but they aren't a full solution, right? And we're trying to get to full usable solutions, and that means ultimately you have to make trade-offs and compromises, right? There are stakeholder interests, right? Because like a single upstream can have a very clear mission, like an integrated solution, harder. Yeah. And it's actually more about it's the conversation as much as it is the technical work.
So with that in mind, the question still applies, although you've framed it, I think, quite well. The question that I was going to drive at is, how do you go about working with new contributors? Like we hear all the time that we need to get fresh blood into Linux because those of us that started in the early 2000s or before are, let's say, moving on to other pursuits eventually, or have less time or anything like that. So how do you see that going?
We're on our way to the Rainbow Bridge, right? It's actually a big concern for me because I know Fedora is now a 20-something-year-old project. That's a generational project. That is amazing, and it's also scary from a governance point of view, right? Because there are people and they're doing valuable work, but I know I have to get people to the point where they're mentoring in new people, especially into the leadership stuff, right? Because I know we're all graying out. Yeah. We can't do this stuff forever because we're human, and so it's a tough challenge. I don't have all the answers. I do know that we have to find a way to reach out to what young people starting their careers, the person I was when I started as a contributor. I'm thinking about that person, what that person looks like now, right? When I was I was in grad school and I was learning Python. I was trying to replace. Remember IDL,
Yes.
like the old IDL. Like I was doing research work, like experimental research work, and my data visualization was all IDL based because it was cargo culted from my advisor, right? And I'm like, screw this. Like this isn't even open. Like what are we doing? How are we ever going to collaborate on this with like other people who are like the next graduate student or at another institution, right? Like, ugh. And so for me, I was trying to learn how to do that so I could be more collaborative, because I wanted academia to be more collaborative. I wanted it all, and it went that way. There's tons of Python, right? Like I was in that moment, and that was the important thing, right? So now I'm thinking like, what's the important thing now if you're that 22-year-old or you're that 20-year-old, and you are, computer science, but also all the adjacent STEM stuff where you have to do programming. Open source matters in some way. What are the things that you need to do now that are interesting in terms of skill development, right? And so the hard part is like, that's AI now. Mm-hmm. That is, I don't want to beat around the bush. That is the tooling, and it's a hard discussion because it's very challenging for the existing ecosystem. Because it's very different than what the world was 20 years ago. But I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about that young adult that I was. And if I was in that position now, what would I need? What would I want to be open? What is the set of tools that I need to have control over, right? So I can do the work. And so that's what I'm thinking about, right? I want to reach out. I want to find the way to reach out to people in college now, people doing independent project work, and say you can contribute to a great open future by using Fedora and contributing to it. You start by using it, and then you can find a way to contribute to it because you're scratching an itch, right? You're digging in, you're giving back because you got value from the output of the existing community.
So along that lines, so I have been a longtime Fedora user. I know that Noah has also been using Fedora a long time.
Since Fedora Core 1.
And
almost as long as me.
The point is, though, I'm more of a passive consumer. I will fix my own stuff. I'll fix my family stuff. But I haven't done pretty much anything to contribute upstream, and I know that I'm not alone. If I was to do it today, my inclination, so just for your own knowledge, I have years in Python, right? Like at one point I forked the Anaconda installer for a company for reasons, whatever, it doesn't matter. But the point is like, I still would reach for an AI tool in order to assist with like, where is this thing in the code base? And I know this is a long-winded way of asking, but as someone who is an active user, but I don't follow the community at all, except when we have guests on, I don't know, is there an AI policy? Like there are places that are like, if you use AI even for introspection, you need to disclose this. There are other places that are like, you can't use AI at all.
Yeah, that was a hard discussion earlier in the year that council went through. In fact, that was an ongoing discussion before I came into the role, and then that work finished up while I was in the first half of my first year, right? And so Fedora does have a policy around AI. It actually lines up really well now. Did you see that the kernel introduced a policy last month?
I heard about it, but I didn't look into it.
Yeah, so it actually aligns really well with how the upstream kernel is doing. And that makes me feel really good that we made a good bet there. Like, we don't know what the right policy is, but we're trying to make an ethical choice. Like, I do know that we aren't ready to trust it to do things, right? But we know assisted development's happening. Right, and we're making a space for that, and so our official policy says, anything in the contribution, you have to let us know, right? Especially this is because slop is difficult for people. It's sloppy use of AI is the kind of thing. My wife has a great phrase for this. I'll get to it, but it's the kind of thing where you do it and you think you're being productive yourself, but you're making a lot of work for other people, especially when it's a conversation that's a collaborative thing, right? So having people show up with AI posts, like even in our, in like a Fedora discussion area, there's like an Ask Fedora, right? And people think they're helping by basically giving an AI answer, right? But they're not, because if the answer's wrong, you've made work for other people. And we have to find the right way to use the tool where we're not making work for other people. And that's a problem with the ecosystem right now. You have a lot of enthusiasm for the tool, but not a lot of experience collaborating that way. And so you're overwhelming upstream projects. Some of the upstream projects have a real problem because enthusiastic users are showing up with not great code, right? But on the same time, I should go back before the thing my wife says. She's like, every time I think about going, like, I use AI to help me draft this. She goes, if you don't spend the time writing it, why should you expect anyone to spend the time reading it?
Ooh, that's good.
It's good, right?
Yeah.
It's good. And I'm like, I'm so glad I married you.
Yeah.
And so I'm very careful with my use for stuff like drafting. Like there are certain things like absolutely I'll use it to help me draft something, but it's a first draft or it's a refinement. But I always take responsibility for what I'm putting down. It is a helper, it is not the thing.
Yeah.
And so that's a gist of what we have for policy right now is that, hey, right now, unless council approves it, right? Because there's some other things we need to do that are experimental because we have to figure other things out. But right now, it's okay to make contributions, but you gotta tell us, right? We have to find a way to evaluate if this is being used appropriately, and if it's not, we need help. We need to build culture around this use because enthusiasm is not enough, right? You have to be, and so my friend back in Alaska, I did projects with him a lot, little small stuff like Raspberry Pis in our curling club. It was cool little project work. Yeah. But I touch base with him still. He raves about his assisted AI workflow. Like I'm personally sort of a skeptic. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying to make a space because my friend, he sees a ton of value, but he knows what he's doing. Right, he's architecturing it. He's talking to the agents and stuff, but he's reviewing he is in charge, and he's getting a ton of value. He's literally like, this is so much fun. Like a year before, it was like just doing some of the curling club infrastructure work, like website and stuff. It was just a drag for him, like because everyone's asking for features. He's trying to do the best for the community that he's in. Right, he's the tech guy in this community, right? And he wants to be better, and he wasn't having fun doing the work. And then he's gotten these workflows, and it's fun for him again. And I can't discount that. Yeah, that is. I look at that, and then it's balanced against the enthusiasm that's causing problems, and then I look at this enthusiasm, but this is an expert, or not an expert's the wrong word, but he's experienced, and he has enough experience to know that sometimes this stuff doesn't provide good answers or good feedback, and it's about discernment, right? Mm-hmm. And we have to figure that out culturally. Mm-hmm. And the real problem with that is, if this is an expert tool, but we're now seeing it being used in situations where people should be learning how to do things, and that is problematic. We have to figure it out. Mm-hmm. We have to figure out how to make sure people know the basics so they can have enough discernment to know when this thing has gone off the rails. Now, what's crazy is the way to do that may actually fight fire with fire. You may have to have AI tools that are helping you discern when other AI tools are not working correctly.
So help me understand that.
Isn't that crazy?
Well, help me understand that in terms of understanding deficit. So if the problem is slop is coming in, how do you not wind up in a situation where slop is combating slop?
Well, I think the agentic stuff can make it to the point where it can be, and this is all speculative. Right?
Yeah,
we don't know how to solve this.
Yeah.
I think there might be a future where some things actually have some guardrails that have expert opinion as guardrails about how they operate, and they're very well scoped. Like you can narrowly scope like an agentic thing that is for review of a language, right? Especially in software specifically. Software, unlike other things, because it's so structured, right? It's so structured and operational. It's not art or literature. They're not. The wealth of opinion that you can put into code is smaller.
Have you read Perl?
No, I haven't read Perl because you can't read Perl because it is one line, and all the function can be in one line. It's unreadable. In fact, the AI might read it better, right? But my point is, like, there may be a future out there, possible future. I like talking about possible futures, where we have a well-scoped role for an agent that can help with discernment instead of being wide open, right?
Doesn't that bring up? So if we have an agent that is going to look over another agent, isn't that the same thing as a middle management? And what I mean by that is, like, let's say I ask you to do a task, like write me an essay or something like that. You hand me your essay, I don't even read it, and I say, Noah, read this essay and tell me if Jeff did the essay correctly. And then, I'm still in the same spot that I didn't understand the what is happening there anyways.
In fact, it might be multiplied because maybe there was an understanding deficit when we went into it, an understanding deficit in the consumption. It just seems like it could.
Well, I think it helps if they're definitely not correlated, like agents. Like, so now we get to, like, maybe what we really need is diversity of models. Maybe we really need to get to local. The future the best ethical future I see involves all of us having hardware where we can run local models, and we are scoping those models for not general tasks, but for the specific agent tasks, right?
So that makes a good ton of sense to me. Where I was going with, at first I was completely on board with your, like, well, we need to teach people discernment before we let them go wild on the tools, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
And I was like, I'm 100% there with you. And then you went, or maybe the solution is just to have the tool look at the tool.
No, I agree. This is all speculative. I don't know how we're going to get there. I do know that we have to have discernment, right? And we have to we still have to have a way to teach people discernment, right? And if that way is wrong, that's okay. I'm not advocating for a specific way. I'm just thinking about possible futures that may work. And it may be the kind of thing where it's heuristic, right? You can also have bad human teachers that do not teach discernment, right? You can have nothing's perfect. It's a matter of, like, what's sufficient? What is the sufficient educational pathway a decade from now, so that we are doing a good enough job, right? Because we're in that moment of transition where we're definitely have a problem, right? And these are possible ways out of it. But humans aren't perfect either, right? I mean, have you had bad professors and teachers?
Have I been one?
Right. I have never been a bad teacher because I never had to teach a class. But so I can. That's something I can avoid. I've been bad at a lot of other things, but we can definitely say that we know there's a discernment problem for juniors, for people early in their careers. But we also have to give them a space. They have to have a space to experiment and fail that doesn't disrupt mature things. Like that's the problem. And we may have to change how we are collaborating so that people we vet contributors a little better, right? We don't just say, "Hey, random person, here, please provide us a PR." That may not be the right way anymore, because because look, we've all seen PRs that are terrible, that are human written, right? Now it's just like, and that's that same enthusiasm. Like, that's an enthusiastic person, right? Now they have a tool that lets them be super enthusiastic, and they haven't thought about the fact that they are causing more work for someone else. That's the thing that that enthusiasm doesn't think about, because they haven't had to work in a collaborative way yet. They've been noodling, right? It's a lot easier when you're just yourself. You've accepted what you're doing, right? Even if it's bad. I've written a lot of bad stuff, right? Because it was only for me.
Exactly.
Only for me. And maybe we're moving to a future where we actually have opened up software stuff so that everyone is able to write bad code for themselves.
Yes.
But they're getting value out of it for themselves. Please never network that stuff.
100%. A
Right.
scary future.
Right. There, I mean, there's a lot of, for me, it was like a lot of data viz stuff. When I was a scientist, a lot of data viz stuff. No one was ever going to use that stuff other than me. But it also wasn't networked, right? It was just me processing data, right? And like me and 2 other people maybe needed it, right? It's like, it's called little open source versus big open source. Like little open source is the stuff that you write for yourself, right? Big open source is the stuff that you write for other people. And how many big open source projects started as a little open source project? You know, we've all seen the picture, the graphic, right? The XKCD, the little stem that some guy in Nebraska is holding up the entire like critical stack. Yeah, no one ever plans for that to go big. It's like, I did a thing, everybody. Here, I did a thing. And everyone's like, that's a cool thing. It's a useful thing. I'm going to use the thing. And then maintainers get overwhelmed because they didn't realize that they were just they are now responsible for everyone's use of their thing.
Yeah.
That is a problem that we've had for 20 years, right? And now it's just, now you have it where you just have, the tool enthusiasm is really high, but the experience with it is really low, and we're dealing with that.
Jef Spaleta, he is the Fedora project leader and a guest this hour on the Ask Noah Show. Jeff, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for coming back. We'll get you back on the program soon.
Great, thank you.
From the Linux Newswire newsroom, this is the Week in Review with JT.
For the week of May 24th, 2026, here's the Linux and open source news. The Midori browser version 11.8 has been released. WordPress 7.0 is out. Less 7.02 is now available. Ardor 9.5 has been released. Mozilla Firefox and Thunderbird versions 151 have been released. In distro news, DietPi 10.4 is now available. Nitrix 6.1 has been released. Tails 7.8 is out. RHEL 10.2 and 9.8 are now available. And Canonical launches Ubuntu Core 26. In open source security news, GitHub is the latest victim of Team PCP, who is able to exfiltrate around 4,000 of GitHub's own code repositories. The Megalodon cyber attack infects around 5,500 open source Git repositories with malware. And Perplexity open sources Bumblebee, a read-only supply chain scanner for developer endpoints. And lastly, DreamWorks open source Moonray Render is now part of the Academy Software Foundation.
The Texas Attorney General has sued Meta over allegations that the company's WhatsApp Messenger, used by more than 3 billion people, doesn't provide end-to-end encryption as it has long claimed. Since at least 2016, Meta, then named Facebook, has said that WhatsApp provides robust end-to-end encryption, meaning that messages are encrypted on a sender's device with keys that are only available to the receiver. By definition, end-to-end encryption means that nobody else, including the platform itself, can read the plain text messenger. The reality is they've been able to do this all along. And in sworn testimony before the U.S. Senate committees in 2018, CEO Mark Zuckerberg said that Meta does not see any of the content in WhatsApp. It's fully encrypted, and that Facebook systems do not see the content of the messages before it's transferred over WhatsApp. The engine for the end-to-end encryption is the Signal protocol, an open-source code base that multiple third-party experts have said lived up to its promises. But in a complaint filed Thursday, the Texas Attorney General said that Meta's claims are false and that the company can and does read the unencrypted contents of WhatsApp messages. They said that they're filing the action to prevent WhatsApp and Meta from contributing to willful deceiving Texans by misrepresenting their private communications were just that, private and inaccessible to WhatsApp, when in fact, Meta and WhatsApp have access to all WhatsApp users' communication in their entirety. So this is the thing that makes this so egregious in my book is that it begins to taint the reputation for all of the other messengers that are doing it the right way. So there's at least one person on planet Earth that reads this story and says to themselves, Oh, man, that's interesting. I didn't know that end-to-end encryption, the signal protocol, I thought that was secure, but it turns out it's not secure, and that it turns out that the people who have it can read. No. Implemented incorrectly, that is accurate. But implemented correctly, that would not be accurate at all. And there's absolutely the ability to keep information private. So, pretty disappointed that this played out the way that it did with Facebook. But the thing is, as soon as they announced it, I and others like me were very, very skeptical that this was going to be the thing. I don't think any of us really believed that this was that this was end-to-end encrypted. And here's the problem. Part of it is Facebook to a degree, Meta to a degree, Google to a degree, Apple to a degree. These companies to a degree need to be able to go in and look at messages, because when they're presented with a court subpoena and says, hey, so-and-so said bad things, we need to know what so-and-so said, they can't say, well, we can't read that, it's encrypted, it violates users' privacies. So to a degree, I'm not defending it, but I am saying it is unlikely that companies are going to stand up for users' privacy. You want privacy? Actually get Signal. Actually get Element or Matrix. Increasingly, you know what I'm finding works really well? Suggesting users sign up for beeper.com and go download the Beeper app. It's designed for humans, has Matrix underneath, and is truly end-to-end encrypted. Sathish Balakrishnan, he is the Vice President and General Manager of the Ansible Business Unit at Red Hat. I guess this hour on the Ask Noah show. Satish, welcome into the program.
Thank you, Noah. Great to be here on the Ask Noah show.
Thank you for making the time, sir. So start by talking to me about the strategic shift from Ansible as an automation tool to Ansible as a trusted execution layer for AI agents. That's something we're hearing more about.
Yeah, absolutely, Noah. This is a great question. This is a question that I get asked quite a bit, right? I think we have to go look back at the history of Ansible and say, why did Ansible become popular? And then we'll build up our case to how we become the trusted execution layer. If you really look at it, before Ansible, right, people just used to write scripts, right? They used to write Python scripts, Perl scripts, all those scripts to do changes in the infrastructure. And it was only accessible to people that knew programming. What Ansible did really well is it made it a YAML execution layer, right? It basically built something called collections, which a lot of people contributed, which was nothing but Python modules, and then we made an automation more accessible for people. That's what Ansible really did well, right? And then from there, we built on, that's great for people that don't know how to do programming, but it still doesn't scale in your enterprise. That's where we built our Ansible Tower, and now we built Ansible Automation Platform, right? This enterprise automation platform. The real idea of the platform is, how do we bring role-based access control? How do we bring governance? How do we bring audit trails to an enterprise-wide automation platform? That's one thing. The second thing that we do really well is, how do we take the knowledge of one person and roll this to the entire enterprise? So, for example, you may have a firewall engineer who has the knowledge of how to configure your firewall in your company. Now that knowledge needs to be translated to hundreds of applications you're building within your enterprise. So the current way that most companies will do it will be like they'll go and they'll build the application, and then the application guy will raise a ticket for this firewall engineer, and the firewall engineer will configure it manually. The way to do it with Ansible will be, take this knowledge of this firewall engineer who knows exactly the configuration of the firewall, put it into a playbook, make it part of every application build that you have. And that way you take this knowledge of this person and translate it to the entire organization. So what do you achieve with this? You do a few things. First thing is, now you know that every application in your enterprise has the exact same firewall rules. The second thing you know is, when you want to change the firewall rules, you know exactly how to change them. The third thing is, this firewall guy is no longer frustrated dealing with application teams, but he can actually now proactively work to figure out how to make the network more secure and do other higher order things, right? It also removes the frustration of the application developers, because they're no longer held hostage by a ticket system and by a network engineer or a firewall engineer. That's the second benefit of the Ansible automation platform, right? So we talked about two things now, right? The third thing is really it now builds this entire knowledge repository of exactly how automation is done within your organization, right? You have a lot of best practices you have codified, you have a lot of governance that you have codified, you have a lot of security practices that you have codified, right? This is all amazing benefits you get. The fourth thing is you are now preventing people from accessing service, SSH into service. That's really the success of an automation program, is the number of SSH into a server is 0. Why is that important? That is important because if people log into an SSH, that means they have credentials. That means those credentials could be hijacked. They could be misplaced. That's the first thing. Second thing is they could do a fat finger and they can make a mistake in something. They could delete a database table. They could do some mistake. The third thing that becomes a problem is there's no audit when they go and do things within their SSH. So that's another thing you're preventing, right? So these are the benefits of the Ansible automation platform. Now we take it into the context of AI, right? AI by its own nature is unpredictable. It keeps evolving its answer until it comes to an acceptable outcome. Operations is deterministic. It's very predictable. So you have to figure out now, how do you take something that's intelligent, that's unpredictable, and put it into operations? How do you do it? You use it using Ansible Automation Platform, which is the trusted execution platform that you basically built over the last 10 years.
Can you talk to me a little bit about understanding deficit? What I mean by that is, so you eloquently pointed out how you can share knowledge across an entire organization. And for the most part, that's good until something falls apart and then the person that's maybe running it doesn't understand it. So there must be a balance, right, on how much the people, the actors inside of an organization need to understand the tooling that they're using down to its basic core level and know how to understand those things versus, well, it's okay for the network engineer guy to tweak the firewalls because he knows all the firewalls. So let him design the firewall rules. You just decide what application or what thing you want to do, and then that goes into production. How would you balance those two things?
Yeah, I think you balance it the same way you balance it today. The application developer doesn't know the firewall rules anyway, right? The firewall engineer only knows the firewall rules. But now what you're doing is you're codifying the firewall rules into an Ansible playbook that anybody can access, right? Okay. That's the first thing. So it's no different from what happens today. You're just making it more efficient and more seamless. The second thing is, because it's YAML, the firewall engineer's playbook is now more readable than a bunch of commands that you put into a firewall that I have no idea what they are because they're proprietary to the firewall vendor. Right? Now the YAML is going to make it much easier to understand exactly what those rules are. The third way you understand these things, if you really want to understand it in the age of AI, is just ask AI, put the YAML into AI and say, hey, explain this to me, and you can understand it. So that is how we simplify things. So it is no different from today, but it makes the process faster, right? The way I like to explain it is DevOps didn't replace operations, it just made operations more efficient.
I like that answer. Can you talk to me a little bit about the separation concerns for security and governance, especially for users who are worried about giving AI too much autonomy? So is there a way with Ansible that we can say, you can do these things, but only these things?
Yeah, 100%, right? So I think the way I like to explain it is think about the way I like to divide it is 3 types of automation, right? You have a task-based automation, which is just like a deterministic automation where you patch a server, you update software, do something very predictable, very easy. It's only one way to do it, right? Then you have something called event-driven automation, event-driven Ansible, where you can actually get events from observability tools or from ITSM tools from third-party vendors that say, hey, the server is down or the server is going to go down. And then you take that and you know predictably, here are the events that I can expect from these vendors because you know what the observability stack looks like. And then you can create some rules in Ansible and say, if this happens, do this. And the third is AI-driven automation, where you're actually now discovering a new issue that you didn't know happens in your environment. And the way that I like to approach it is, the first one is you want to first do discovery with AI. What do I mean by that, right? I have an issue. Now let AI go and figure out what is the configuration of the servers before the issue happened, when the issue is happening, after the issue happened, right? You can get that into your ITSM tool of choice, or you can put it into a log file, wherever you want, and AI can analyze it and explain to you what the problem is, right? So first is just that. And Ansible does it really well. Ansible can look at the configuration, upload all of those things into your ITSM tool or any other place that you want it. So you can have AI run it. AI can understand it and say, hey, here is what's going wrong. The second step of it is let AI run through your Ansible playbooks, know how you build playbooks, know what playbooks you have, and then actually now tell the AI to say, okay, you found this issue, which playbooks will you use to remediate it, okay? Why is this important? This is important because those playbooks are tested, verified, you know what they do, they're predictable. So that way when AI does it, it's not doing something that's unpredictable. Now the third thing is you want it to create the playbook. Okay, so when you create the playbook, you haven't really tested that playbook in this context. So you want to get a human to verify that this works before you promote it. So the way I look at it is when you do task-based automation, that's the foundation, you need this. Event-driven automation is the second step of evolution, and AI-driven is the third step. But once you do the AI-driven, you then migrate it. It either becomes a task-based automation or it becomes an event-based automation, and you use AI one time. Now, some people may say, hey, why do I need task-based and event-based? I could just do everything with AI. So as I explained, two things, right? It's all about predictability. AI is not predictable. The second thing is if you're really going to patch a server or reboot a server, do you really want to use your tokens for that cost, for just doing something predictable? Don't you have like higher order things that you want to use AI for, is the question that I would ask, right? And the second question I'll ask that is, think of the last time you used something in production that you hadn't tested. You would never use it, right? And when you start using things you haven't tested, that's when databases get deleted or customer records get deleted.
You teased a new drag and drop workflow engine that's coming to Summit 2026 that would make automation accessible beyond traditional IT ops teams. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely, right? So I think Ansible is a fantastic engine. It has its own workflow editor today, right? But what we are doing is we're building the next generation of workflow adapt for the AI age, right? So what we have done is we built a new workflow orchestrator that basically has a drag and drop interface that basically allows you to do things in a much more efficient way of building workflows in a very efficient way, right? One of the limitations we have is as you start building more complex workflows, it becomes a little harder to manage Ansible. So one of the things is we're making it easier. But also the second thing that we are doing is we are actually trying to make sure that you can have workflows that run forever. Like for example, workflows to look for configuration drift. So you can say, hey, this is the configuration I want in my servers. If anything changes, fix it, right? And you can, in the meantime, say, let's go and check post it into the ITSM tool. So I have a record of this. So I have an audit trail of what happens, and send me a message if something that's never happened, so that I know what happens, right? Trigger something. The other way to do it is also things like CVEs, right? So one of the things now is, AI is finding CVEs at a rate which is incredibly good and incredibly scary, right? Because there are vulnerabilities in the Linux kernel that's been undiscovered for 23 years that AI found, like just out of whim or fancy. As this happens and AI becomes available to bad actors, now patching is not optional, and patching is not something you want to do every 6 months, every 3 months, or every month, or every week. You may want to do it every hour, every day, right? When that happens, you want to build a workflow that actually can say, go look for my CVEs, and we have things like Red Hat Lightspeed, which is formerly called Red Hat Insights, which actually can tell you all the vulnerabilities you have in Linux, right? And I'm pretty sure there are other things that exist for Windows and networks and other things. So you can actually have events trigger from those services, and then you can automatically identify using this new workflow orchestration which are the machines that are impacted and how do you patch them. And this is where the knowledge that you bring into your enterprise becomes important, because you can say this is when we need to schedule the maintenance window for the different categories of servers, and then you can automatically patch. And before you knew, that there was a vulnerability, you have all your machines patched.
Can you tell me one thing that you wish every Ansible user that they understood where the platform is going that people are still missing? They're new to the platform, they don't understand something, and you say, I wish every new person to Ansible knew this or was aware that this is where this platform is going, what it's doing.
Yeah, I think I'll say this, right? In 2024, we said automation is mission critical, right? And automation is mission critical. You need to have the mission critical mentality in order for you to be successful in automation, right? Because automation is usually something that people think is very important for other people, but not for themselves. So always I say to customers, start your projects with automation, not end it with automation, because by the time you're ready to end it, you already want to go to the next project. Right? That's the first thing. And then in 2025, we said, hey, AI automation is the foundation for using AI in IT operations, right? Without really having an interconnected system of interconnected tools and interconnected processes across all of your domains, you can't really apply AI. AI agents can't run across if, no, you're doing something manually and I'm doing something manually, then AI doesn't know what we are doing, right? So it has to be automated. So that becomes important, right? So now I think once you understand all of those things, you need to now understand that in this new era of 2026, really automation is multi-mode, right? It must be multi-mode. It should have task-based, it should be event-based, and it should be AI-driven. All three of them coexist. So you can't really just say, I will only do AI-driven, because you will not be successful. We had a customer in 2024 talk about it at our Ansible Fest keynote, where they said they tried to do automation without AI without automation, and they failed because AI was hallucinating and coming up with very novel solutions to problems every single time they identified the same problem, right? So that's what I would say is, think of automation as mission critical. Understand that, without automation, AI will not be used in your enterprise IT. And remember that, automation is really multi-mode.
Sathish Balakrishnan. He is the Vice President and General Manager of Ansible Business Unit at Red Hat and a guest this hour on the Ask Noah show. Sathish, I appreciate the time. Thank you, sir, for joining us. We'll get you back in the program soon.
Thank you, Noah. Awesome. Great talking to you.
This show only happens with your feedback. It guides the questions that we ask these experts. It guides the topics we bring to light. It guides basically everything that we do. And so as just from time to time, it is appropriate and necessary to kind of reset the ground rules to say, hey, the calls go to the front of the line. So if you want your question answered, you want to make absolutely sure that your question gets answered that night, join us at 6 p.m. Central at AskNoahShow.com and give us a call at 855-450-NOAH, 855-450-6624. If you can't be here live, that's okay. There's a number of ways for you to get your question into us. The first is by sending an email to live@asknoahshow.com. Now, the whole idea, why is it live at asknoahshow.com? Well, the idea is that you could send it in live during the show. But if you're not able to make it during the show, you can send it in after the show. The other way that you can do it, there is a robot. He never sleeps. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. He scours the Geek Lab. #GeekLab:LinuxDelta.com. And if you tag Marlon and ask him a question, he will flag that question and have it available to us the next week. That'll do it for this week's episode. We're back next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Central, AskNoahShow.com.